Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us at Yeshiva University's panel on Modern Orthodox Education in 21st Century Israel and America. My name is Stephanie Straus, and I have the privilege of being the director of Yeshiva University in Israel. At Yeshiva, we often speak about collaboration and about working together to confront challenges and about sharing ideas and convening resources. Facilitating a program such as this in Yerushalayim is a perfect example of our collaborative efforts. Whether you live in Eretz Yisrael or are here visiting, you can feel the energy of a shared mission around this room and surely appreciate the strength of the united YU community. The Office of Alumni Affairs, the Esti Abraham Israel Program, and the Yeshiva University in Israel are thrilled to host you today. Our panelists and speakers represent both sides of the ocean and are all luminaries in Jewish education and thought. They are looking forward to sharing their views with you in a conversation that we hope will be interactive as it is informative. Our list of speakers this morning is quite impressive, and I would like to take this opportunity to recognize a few other dignitaries who have joined us today from our home campus at YU in New York. Dr. Esther Joel, Rav David Miller, the Benjamin and Charlotte Gottesfeld Chair in Talmud and the Rosh Kollel at the RIETS Israel Kollel, Mr. Seth Moskowitz, Vice President for Institutional Advancement, Mr. Michael Strauss, Associate Dean at the Sim School of Business and Assistant to the Provost, Mrs. Ethel Orlean, Associate Dean at Stern College for Women, Mrs. Susie Schwartz, Assistant Vice President for Alumni Affairs and Strategic Development, Dr. Stuart Halpern, Assistant Director at the Zahava and Moshael Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought, and Mrs. Jerry Mansdorf, our Director of Undergraduate Admissions. Among those seated in the audience today are proud YU alumni, some who graduated long ago and some more recently, as well as some of our future YU students. In 1956, Dr. Samuel Belkin, the second president of Yeshiva University, published his Essays in Jewish Thought. In one such essay, he states the following: "If we seek the blending of science and religion and the integration of secular knowledge with sacred wisdom, then it is not in the subject matter of these fields, but rather within the personality of the individual that we hope to achieve the synthesis." It is the integration of this idea that forms the backbone of Yeshiva University and is the common denominator between our students, our faculty, and our community. And it is in this context that we present this morning's program. To offer opening remarks, I'd like to introduce someone who is well known throughout the world of Jewish education. Dr. Karen Bacon is a proud alumna of Stern College for Women who completed her graduate studies at UCLA before returning to join the faculty at Stern for a brief period. Soon after, she assumed the position of dean at Stern College, where she has been instrumental in the development and explosive growth of the college over many years. Recently, Dr. Bacon's role was expanded so that her many skills could be utilized on both campuses and her strength of character could be felt throughout the university. It is my honor to present my dear colleague, the Mordecai D. Katz and Dr. Monique C. Katz, Dean of Undergraduate Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Yeshiva University, Dr. Karen Bacon.
Good morning, everyone. Birshus, President Joel, and all of our dignitaries and our distinguished guests. I want to offer you greetings on behalf of the faculty, the students, and the staff of Yeshiva University in New York. I know that they would all like to be here with us today, not only because of the privilege of being in Yerushalayim, but because the topic that we are going to discuss today is of vital importance to them. They live it every single day of the week. The curriculum at Yeshiva University is a very challenging one. We're asking the students to care about, to engage in universal human concerns, and at the same time recognize that there are distinct, particular Jewish covenantal concerns. We're asking them to take advantage of the American passion for individual autonomy and independence, and at the same time realize they have a responsibility to be part of community, to build community, and to recognize communal authority. This is an awful lot to put on the plate of an undergraduate student, but we've seen time and again that as they rise to these challenges and internalize the messages, they are equipped with the intellectual, the emotional, the spiritual skills to bring us all to a better place. Malcolm Hoenlein is quoted as having said that the greatest danger to our community is ignorance and apathy, and our greatest strength is unity. At Yeshiva University, we daily are combating Jewish ignorance and apathy, and we are fostering Jewish unity. I believe today, as we hear from our panelists, they will give us new insights into how to further these agendas as well as others. And I think these agendas are of vital importance as we face the future. So I would now like to turn over the program to our moderator, Rabbi Assaf Bednarsh. Rabbi Bednarsh is the Sgan Rosh Kollel of the Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Theological Seminary Kollel in Israel, and the Ruth Buchbinder Chair in Talmud and Jewish Law at Yeshiva University. Before coming to Israel and making Aliyah, he taught at our high school for boys and was the Maggid Shir at the Women's Talmud graduate program at Stern College. He teaches at Yeshivat Har Etzion. He lives in Alon Shvut with his distinguished wife and family, and he is beloved and respected by everyone at the Yeshiva University family. It is my pleasure to introduce Rav Assaf Bednarsh.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here this morning. It's a special treat for me to be able to sit in a panel with three such distinguished colleagues and friends. I would like to point out as well that we're celebrating the release of a book, maybe the first book, put out by the Zahava and Moshael Straus Center for Torah and Western Thought at Yeshiva University, headed by my dear friend Rabbi Dr. Meir Soloveichik. This book about Torah and Western Thought, Intellectual Portraits of Orthodoxy and Modernity. It basically goes through the Gedolim of the last 100 years of modern Orthodoxy and shares with us some of their perspectives and how they reconciled, balanced, and bridged Orthodoxy and modernity, or Torah and Western thought. It's exciting for me to think that while I'm holding this book, and there are 3 copies of that book that the 3 panelists will be taking home with them, I am inviting up to speak 3 people who will be in the next generation's version of this book, and who are really the leaders and guiding lights of my community. I would first like to call up President Richard Joel. President Richard Joel is my boss. I'm going to skip the academic resume because to me what's important is that President Joel has been inspiring Jews for decades. First as International Director of Hillel, and since 2003 as President of our very own Yeshiva University. President Joel, I would like you to spend a few minutes sharing with us your unique perspective as President of Yeshiva University. Maybe you could discuss what role Yeshiva University does, or perhaps even what role Yeshiva University could and should play in educating the next generation of modern Orthodox Jews and in helping to shape the contours of the modern Orthodox world.
Thank you, Rabbi Bednarsh, Bishus Rosh Kollel, who's with us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a really great pleasure to be here with you. I listened very carefully to what Rabbi Bednarsh said. I have no intention of speaking about any of that, except in the questions where I have to. I do hearken back actually to the easiest and most pleasant aspect of my career when I was arresting murderers in the Bronx as an assistant district attorney. But it's been a wonderful ride, and let me share a few thoughts with you, if I might. First of all, disclaimer. We're all tired of Americans coming to Israel telling Israel what Israeli modern Orthodox education is or should be. So thank God we have experts here to do that. The only layman's opinion I will offer on that, for what it's worth, is I think we are 2 different communities with different and distinct but parallel opportunities and challenges, and how we develop that becomes a wonderful sharing of equals that I think is important as we move forward. I also have to, since I'm providing a particularly American viewpoint today, I have to talk about something off topic, which is to remind ourselves that Hamonam, that the vast majority of the Jewish people are not modern Orthodox. And in an American context, there are two issues. We have to know how to live in that sea, but more important, if we forget our brothers and our sisters, then who's going to be left? And I want to recall when I used to work for Hillel, I gave a talk at a community center in Atlanta, Georgia, one of these usual Jewish identity talks. And full disclosure, this goes back to the 90s. And there was a full house of people, and I was doing what all people in my position were doing, talking about how important it is to be Jewish. But I was trying to point out also the level of apathy and ignorance that plagues our community and that frankly is our largest existential challenge. So I said to that group, I have to ask you all a very difficult question. How many people in this room can tell me the name of Jesus' mother? And how many people in this room can tell us the name of Moses' mother? And heads nodded vigorously. I finished my speech. People came around. One fellow came over to me and said, Mr. Joel, my name is Schindler. I'm originally from Brooklyn. I said, how are you, Schindler? He says, I want you to know I'm different from all the people here. I said, you are? He says, yeah. I know her name. I said, you do? He says, yeah. It's Yoshabel. Well, not Yoshabel. But the fella had the bad luck to be speaking to one of the few idiot savants who knows the only place that Moshe's mother's name is mistranslated as Yoshabel. Anybody know? Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. He saw the movie, he didn't read the book. And our challenge today is that we're dealing with a community that's not even sure they want to see the movie, but avada they haven't read the book. And that should not give us any joy or satisfaction. It's an enormous tragedy for them because most American Jews are not walking away from their Jewishness. They've never encountered it. They've never encountered it. They don't think there's something valuable that they're leaving. It's one of the reasons why the Taglit, the birthright program, which I was also blessed to be a founding part of, is so important because it gives Jews who are uninvolved, right, an opportunity to own their Jewishness in a way they never have before. And thousands of people come for another profoundly Jewish reason that's free. So I want to speak about Torah Umada, or modern Orthodoxy, or modern Orthodox education, and they're all intertwined in the United States, in the context of the reality that we shouldn't think that every breath we take should be focused only on ourselves. It's not why we were created, and it won't make us successful. The best way to talk about modern Orthodoxy or modern Orthodox education is, I should say, it's complicated, and I'll sit down. But hopefully we'll have discussion and we'll have many other insights and we can address things more that way. I wanted to invoke my three predecessors, Rabbi Revel, Rabbi Belkin, and Libodel L'chaim Tovim, Dr. Norman Lamb, in terms of this enterprise. Just to tell you a little bit that the more things change, the more they stay the same. But to tell you that the reality of then and the reality of now is the same. I was talking to some friends who said they were part of a wonderful chevra, a unique chevra, and there are so many here, and Baruch Hashem, so many, we don't know exactly how many, but at least 4,000 yeshiva families are living in Israel, have made aliyah, and please God, many more. You should know that these days, between 15 and 20% of our students make aliyah. And it's a source of great pride. In fact, on our flagpole, we fly the flag of the United States and the flag of Israel. And for the last few weeks, the Minnesota Vikings flag as well. But these gentlemen said, we were just an unbelievable chevra. And we've gone through life. And I said to them, I want you to come to YU to meet the next generation's wonderful chevra, because there's that same feeling. So if you're waiting for me to talk about doom and gloom, I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about opportunity. But in 1925, Dr. Bernard Revel said the following in something called a Statement of Aims of Yeshiva College. The Yeshiva College aims to foster harmonious growth in which the bases of modern knowledge and culture in the fields of art, science, and service will be blended with the bases of Jewish culture to develop devoted and informed sons in the underlying faith and spirit of Israel. The college aims at the inculcation of an abiding consciousness of the high ideals and the supreme heritage of the Jewish people, and at the development of intellect and character through the pursuit of those harmonizing studies by which life as a whole may be elevated. Important statement, and one that I hope you would make today. Dr. Belkin in 1956 said the following: "It's our intention to give to secular education a higher purpose and make the yeshiva and yeshiva college a living symbol of intellectual progress and moral activity. We believe that by reintegrating our lives with the ideals of Torah and with our search after God's knowledge, we can succeed in establishing a medium for the unification of human knowledge." Dr. Lamb, this is a quote from Dr. Lamb. Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin says in his Tzidkat HaTzadik that he had read or heard someplace that God wrote a book, and that book is the world, and that he also wrote a commentary, and that commentary is the Torah. So the world and the Torah are related as a text and a commentary. Now this means that the two of them together form a whole, and that achieves a primordial harmony. To go further, Dr. Lamb said, we can ask, what is the essence of Chumash Bereshis? The idea that God created the world. What's the essence of Shmos? That God gave the Torah. So God in his office of creator and God in his office of revealer or teacher are both one. Torah umada means Torah relates to Shmot, and Mada relates to Bereshit. Or Mada relates to the book, Torah relates to the commentary, but the two of them are taken together. Through Torah umada, you reestablish that harmony. Well, I have the privilege for the last 13 years to serve as the steward of Yeshiva and have tried to give context in contemporary terms, but not just in speeches, but in what the living and breathing environment of our world is. And frankly, Yeshiva's voice informs so much of Torah education in the United States today. I began by speaking of what I call Torah umada lechatchila, that living life as a, quote, modern Orthodox Jew is an aspiration, it's not an excuse. Well, we're in America, we're modern, how do we hold on to being frum but still be in America? That's not it at all. That's not it at all. That we aspire to this synthesis, this harmony, this dialectic that can be resolved even as it's never resolved. That modern Orthodoxy has to be an aspiration, and to meet that aspiration, I think language of today is that we have to build an integrated life based on Torah. An integrated life based on Torah. It's not removing ourselves from society, and it's not from meeting the expectations of a highly secular society, but in order to achieve shleimut, which of course means wholeness, but also means integrity, to achieve shleimut, it's modeling for young people that life isn't a religious track and a secular track, but it's an integrated, harmonious existence, but one that we have to struggle with, because by definition, it is much more difficult than being on one extreme and saying everything's very clear, and on the other extreme, nothing really matters, so everything is fine. That's not our way. It's not why we were here, and I think it's not our covenantal responsibility to be a Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. So the last thing I'd leave you with, because there's much more to say, and I'm just one of three presenters, and then we'll talk. I was asked recently, what do I think the major challenges are to modern Orthodoxy or to modern Orthodox education? And I'm going to skip over obvious ones because somehow they're less important. I think number one, we have to say what we are, not what we're not. We have to be able to articulate with joy, what we stand for. And I must say, we have to be able to tell that to ourselves and our children. By that I mean our kids, please God, accept the whole package and accept it and speak to it. But if you drill down and ask them to explain, what is Masorah? What is Masorah? What does it mean to you? How does it function today? They kind of stare at you and they want an answer. If you say to them, what's psak? Who are poskim? And how do you get to be that way? There are answers for that, but we don't address that. And there are a whole litany of basic issues that if we are able to, with nuance, but not only in a 17-page treatise or in a 3.5-hour shiur, if we are able to address those issues, we provide strength and comfort to our own children, and we become the kind of valuable, proactive, wondrous system that we can speak of with pride to the rest of the world, and we are yet to do that. And I think it's really important in education on all levels. Number two, we have to make sure that education is passionate, not just dry study. It has to be filled with a sense of joy and responsibility. It has to be filled with a sense of integration. It has to be filled with all the experiential education opportunities that we give, both formal and, frankly, in the most important educational environment, the home. If people go through life in a home devoid of Jewish passion, don't expect them to pick it up elsewhere, even if they go to Camp Marasha or Moshava. Number three, we have to acknowledge nuance. It's not so simple, and it's not simple to start by saying, well, it's not so simple. We are based, in some ways, we are an elite culture. We believe you have to know a lot about a lot of things in order to understand it fully and with color. And we shouldn't stand away from that. I will tell you that young people hunger for depth. They hunger to matter. They just have to be fed it and engaged in it. And the fourth issue that's very important to me is that we have to proceed with civility. We are so good at yelling at each other. I used to hate quoting Richard Nixon, but now I can say that I found out that Bill Safire wrote this statement. He said it in his first inaugural. He said, we cannot listen to one another until we stop shouting at one another, until we speak quietly enough so that our words can be heard as well as our voices. Right? We lose when we scream at each other. We persuade when we reach out hands, honor each other for what they are, and have open and honest disagreements. Of course I have more to say, and of course I'm smart enough not to. Thank you very much.
I would now like to call on my neighbor, Esti Rosenberg. Esti is a leader, even a pioneer in women's Torah education in Israel for the past few decades as Rosh Beit Midrash of the Midrash at Lindenbaum Advanced Program, and since 1997 as the founder and head of the Beit Midrash Migdal Oz for women. Esti, as an Israeli educator, perhaps you could reflect on the differences. An Israeli educator who runs an institution that teaches Americans as well, perhaps you could reflect a bit on the difference between the challenges of modern Orthodox education in contemporary Israel versus America, and in the different ways that we should strive to meet those challenges.
Shalom lekulam. I'll speak in English, don't worry. I should worry about that. Professor Joel said that it's enough with Americans that have a lot to say about Israeli education. So I have the great pleasure being an Israeli, and I can say now whatever I want about American education. I don't even have to travel to America in order to do that. So that is a big pleasure for me to say something, for good or for bad, about education that I'm not only responsible for. It's true that I meet a lot. We have in our Bednarsh 120 Israeli students and 40 American students, which are completely integrated within the Israeli program. And a big challenge, maybe I want to describe a bit what happens when the American modern Orthodox education system meets or combines together with the Israeli modern Orthodox education system. Maybe I'll start with two sentences that I'll quote one of students, and the second one I'll quote myself. I'll start maybe that in our Beit Midrash, the Rashut Rabim is Israeli, but there is once a year, there's a night that's called Erev America, and where American students work a lot about trying to explain their world to the Israelis. What is the educational system about? What happens in America? In what ways is America mindset religiously, spiritually, intellectually different than the Israeli one? And the discussion, it used to be only, like a fun night describing camp and college. But in the past years, a few years, we decided also to ask questions which are deeper questions about what are the differences between the Israeli educational system and the American one. And the conversation usually ends by there's a lot of girls that say, I really want to make Aliyah, but I'm going to make such an educational big sacrifice. My kids won't have the great opportunity to be educated in the American high school system, and what a big loss that is. And I feel that American students experience leaving the American, not giving over to their kids, the experience that they had in the American high school system, it's a big sacrifice. They think that they're giving up something. And my father, in the interview that Eliashiv Reichner had with him when he turned 80, 2 years ago, he was asked the same question. I'll leave his answer to the end. But the Americans do feel, also Olim that I talk to, when will we have the opportunity of building a high school as good as the high schools in America? That's one thing I want to open with. The second is that when I go to America to recruit, and I want to explain to parents and students what's going to happen when their daughter is going to walk in. What does it mean to be an American student in a mostly Israeli Beit Midrash? I'll quote as I say it. I say it like 20 times in 7 days, so I know it by heart. And it goes like this. I'm going to say something which is very generalizing, but I'm willing to stand behind what I'm saying. And I say like this: the American high school system is much more intellectually oriented than the Israelis one. Okay, Israelis are more, I would say, spiritual, emotional, I even say mushy, if you want to phrase it like that. And Americans are much more intellectually focused, which means that before Rosh Hashanah, Americans want to sit in rows, to take notes, and to be taught in Masechet Rosh Hashanah. Israelis, I've said it's I'm generalizing, but as a mindset of the educational systems, Israelis are much more used to sit in circles and discuss their feelings. How do I prepare towards Rosh Hashanah? What good advice can we give each other relating the questions of davening? What does it mean to Yitpalel b'chavana for so many hours? What things can I emphasize on? Which part in the tefillah do I like the most? And in the first day I tell this story to the girls, in the first day of Migdal Oz a couple of years ago was Rosh Chodesh Elul. The girls were asked, the first session of the year, together they were sitting together with their Ram and their Ramit in a circle. They were not taking notes. There was no chart on the bulletin board, and they were asked to choose from the David Hashem Ori Vishi, the pasuk that reflects the most their feelings walking into the word of Torah? I think it's a beautiful question. It was ראש חודש אלול, לדוד השם אורי ואישי, אחת שאלתי מת השם אותה אבקש, אלול, a new word of Torah, walking into a Beis Midrash. They were supposed to choose this pasuk and talk about it. Some of the Israelis, but all of the Americans, found this question strange, weird, too personal. This is not why I came to learn Torah. What is this all about? And whoever's looking carefully, there are a lot of students there that are nodding in their head because they know exactly what I'm talking about. So when the Americans walk into Migdal Oz, they think that some of the things that we do there are a waste of time. Why are we not always, or maybe I'll quote a student who said to me, when I was in America, everything about my learning, we learned Gemara, everything was in charts. Everything was written on the bulletin board in a chart. Someone told me that you can also learn Torah in a dialogue, and not only in charts. And I think that America is very, very intellectual focused, because the end of high school, Pisgat Kol HaSheifot is college. And maybe, even though we are in a YU event, an Ivy League college. And in Israel, Pisgat Kol HaSheifot, when you finish college, is איזה שירות אני אעשה, as a woman at least, for the beginning, איזה שירות אני אעשה. College is so far away. You get to college when you be 23, 24, if you're a boy, 22, 23, if you're a girl who went to שנתיים שירות, in 1 year of learning Torah at least. College is not the aim of the goal of high school. There's no connection between college and high school. But I think it's more than that. Over 50 years ago, the Rav wrote על אהבת התורה וגאולת נפש הדור. And when he writes על אהבת התורה וגאולת נפש הדור, which was published in Ador, this is 50 years ago. I must say that I think what I think before, first, I feared very strongly that America is too much intellectually focused. And I think we pay a high price. I think Israel is also too much spiritual focus, and we pay a high price for that too. But after thinking about this a lot, when I woke up this morning, I said to myself, oh, but the Rav wrote this 50 years ago. 50 years ago, he writes about הנוער האמריקאי. He even, in a very moving piece, blames himself. And he writes about what he calls גדלות המוחין וקטנות המוחין. גדלות המוחין that he describes is the intellectual aspect of learning Torah. The chart, the capture, the intellectual, the brisker derech, learning, being focused on learning Torah, putting Torah in the center of our religious life, putting learning Torah, understanding Torah. I think those are the things that the American student thinks that she's going to give up when she makes Aliyah. Really, the intellectual aspect of learning Torah. And I think whoever knows, the Rav knows how important for him the intellectual aspect of learning Torah, the center of Torah. And Dr. Lamb wrote a whole book about Torah Lishma and Reb Chaim's view of how important learning Torah is. But then the Rav continues and discusses not only Gadlut HaMochin, but Katnut HaMochin. Katnut HaMochin, what he describes here, is the small boy that runs to the arms of Hashem as his father. He discusses the religious experience. He discusses the heart. He discusses how the mind goes. כל תילי תילים של הלכות יורדים, he writes about also באיש ההלכה, יורדים בהרג בערגה. I think the religious, ערגת אלוקים, דרישת אלוקים. I discussed this with my mother last night, and she said, I think American jury took Isha Halacha. I think it's not Isha Halacha. I think the Talmud Torah shel Isha Halacha from the Rav much more than they took Isha Emunah. And I think that's something that is a very, very big difference between America and Israel. The ability of an American student not only to learn Torah, to know Torah very intellectually, but also to ask herself, how does this make an impact on her religious life, on emotion? Is this connected to her? Is this something that will make a big impact on how she'll behave religiously when she goes and continue on to college? How much America is completely, when you go into an American high school, it's all about tracks. Everything is tracked. Gemara is tracked, and Tanakh is tracked. I'm in this track, I'm in that track, I'm in this track, I'm in that track. Now, Israel is not tracked. Because Israel makes, we also pay a price for that, for sure. Israel is more about how do I meet what I learned? How does this influence the learning? Be'emet ze kli to get to the religious emotion. And I think in America, הלימוד הוא מטרה בפני עצמה, and the question that I want to ask is then, do we continue on, does America continue on to the next stage, where is to stop from your learning and ask yourself, how does this influence not only the intellectual part of the religious experience, but also the emotional, davening, who I am, what I do, how does this influence my life? And once, years ago, I was interviewing a student in one of the high schools in New York, and she was learning Gemara, and of course in the highest level track, and I asked her, what Masechet do you learn? And she said, Chulin. And I asked her, did you ever discuss in the class with any, that would never over in an Israeli high school, Chulin. 12th grade for girls and also for boys, you would ask yourself, what is Chulin connected to my religious life today? How will Chulin make me more prepared for the balance of being modern Orthodoxy, which I think is a very big challenge, but I think that's in our second part of our discussion. So she said to me, no. I said, there was no discussion in the class about Chulin in your religious life? Why Chulin? No one asked why Chulin and not something else? No, never dawned on me. We're learning Chulin. That's what we're learning. That's what we're learning. And then I thought a lot about that, because I said that would never go in Israel. And in that specific case, in that specific high school, I don't want to generalize, but when I got home, I understood that really this girl is challenged in Chulin as she challenged herself in other stuff. I don't think she thinks or expects that there should be a connection between Chulin and her davening. And therefore, she doesn't mind to learn Chulin, because she's very challenged in math, and she's challenged in science, and she's challenged in Gemara too, so she learns Chulin. Doesn't make a difference. I think that that's a question. I don't know if in comparison to Israeli education, but that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. When we teach Chulin, or when we focus so much on the intellectual growth of learning Torah, do our students get more tools, not only about intellectual growth, but also about religious growth? And the Rav there answers. And he says, also a couple of places in Ala Tshuva, he says, I'm a wonderful melamed, I can explain Kol Ilchot Avodat Yom HaKippurim, but can I give to my students the same experience that Reb Chaim felt when he said Seder HaAvodah? I can't. And when he discusses it, Belavat HaTorah V'Geulat Nefesh Ador, he says, why do I feel that my Talmidim got for me Gadlut HaMochin, but did not get for me Katnut HaMochin? And his answer, he says, I can't blame anyone else, can only blame myself. I feel that I wasn't, Mamash, he ends this very emotional, I think maybe the most intimate lines that the Rav writes about himself. He ends and he says, Chatati kemarbit Torah shebalev. V'yesh Torah shebalev. Now Israel is much too much involved in Torah shebalev. Much too much about spiritual questions and how does this connect to me, and if it doesn't connect to me, I don't do it. And Israel is also too spiritual. I think Israel asks themselves, and in every religious life, I think the Rav emphasizes a lot, the balance between Katnut HaMochin v'Gadlut HaMochin, v'Torah shebarosh v'Torah shebalev, and being connected and being a part, and being committed also when you're not, but you don't identify, you don't feel. I think that's one of our biggest religious challenges, the balance between commitment and inspiration, or commitment and our feelings, what Rav Amital in a famous essay calls הפער בין מחויבות והתחברות. And I think those questions are one of the biggest challenges in modern Orthodoxy, both in Israel and both in America. And I think that each one of our societies choose to go to extreme. The Israeli extreme is that really Israeli high schools are literally not intellectual focused. Israeli teenagers have to work very hard to be intellectual. It's not part of their high school passion. It's not what they are taught. And the message is that it doesn't make such a big difference. העיקר שאתה טוב, אתה גומל חסד, ואתה מתנדב. And Israelis are really not intellectual enough. But I think that Americans are too intellectual in their religious education. And I think that we have to find a way to balance both things. I would say that the nisayon to do that in Migdal Oz, to take 40 American students and integrate them completely in an Israeli mindset is really sometimes challenging, because the Americans really have higher demands and standards of what learning Torah is about, and that is wonderful, and that's the biggest present that they give the Beit Midrash, but we fight them back. There are witnesses here. We fight them back. I sometimes say that my main job in the Beit Midrash is to bother people from learning Torah, which means to stop them and say, okay, you learned so much, but how does that impact your religious life? How is learning Torah going to make you more prepared to continue on to be committed, serious when you continue on to college? And a surprise, not all of our students continue on to Stern College and to YU, and some of them go to very difficult places and they challenge themselves way behind what they can do, but that I'll discuss in the second part. And I think that the question is, are they prepared for those challenges? And how do they translate the intellectual Torah, which I really believe in mitzvah Talmud Torah, but how does mitzvah Torah then be challenged to mitzvah Tfilah, Ahavat Hashem, Yirat Hashem, ומחויבות הלכתית? And I'll end, נכון, I have to end. So I'll end in that when my father was asked by Eliashiv Reichner, so aren't you sorry sometimes that you made Aliyah and your kids lost all that great, he was then not even talking about intellectual learning Torah, because that my father continued here at Israel, but he was talking about just Western culture. And without pleating an eyelash, not even surprisingly, he said, absolutely not. It's true that I don't have anyone to להוריש לו את my English literature library, which is not true because my brother Moshe can cope with that English literature library, but I can't. And he said, I never regretted my aliyah because no one's not continue on reading those Western philosophy books that I have. When I look about the Israeli youth and their he was discussing Bikar Chesed, but I think it's not only Chesed. I'm very happy. Now, I do believe that our students are right. They're going to lose something making Aliyah and giving up the intellectual growth and sakranut that America can give you. And I think that we have to try to learn how to balance between intellectual growth and spiritual growth and let our students enjoy both parts of them.
I'd like to call upon my old buddy, Rabbi Dr. Meir Yaakov Soloveichik, who is the director of the Zahava and Moshael Straus Center for Torah and Western Thought at Yeshiva University and rabbi of Congregation Shearith Israel in Manhattan. Rabbi Dr. Soloveichik is related to half of the figures featured in the book that he published. No nepotism here. But I would like to ask him perhaps to reflect on the lessons that he learned from his Masorah, from his grandfather, perhaps from his grandfather Aaron Soloveichik, perhaps from his great uncle the Rav, that are relevant to meeting the challenges of the next generation of modern Orthodoxy.
Well, I want to begin by thanking Rabbi Bednarsh. He truly is my old buddy. And considering the fact that he knew me when I was 16 in the YU-based Medrash, I want to thank him not only for the kind words that he said in his introduction, but also for what he did not say about me. I'm most grateful to you, Rabbi Bednarsh, and it's wonderful to see you again. We're here in Heichal Shlomo, and I want to recognize Rabbi Ari Berman. Rabbi Berman, when he was the rabbi of the Jewish Center, took a chance on a young 19-year-old kid hired him to be, or 20-year-old kid, hired him to be or was a little older than that, to be the rabbinic intern at the Jewish Center. And he was a dear friend and a mentor. And I'm so grateful to him to this day. And all comments and critiques about anything controversial that I say today should go directly to him, because it's his fault for everything that I've done up to this point. I want to thank President Joel for his leadership and for his friendship. And I don't disagree. I agree with everything you said, President Joel, except I will note that The Ten Commandments is my favorite movie, and I've learned a great deal from it, actually. And I actually just recently found out, I don't know if you know this, I was looking into the important question of what happened to the luchos from the Ten Commandments that were used in the filming. And this is true. I discovered that Cecil B. DeMille donated the luchos to Mount Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, so that the luchos of the Ten Commandments were literally in Mount Sinai for decades. So that speaks to bringing Torah to the world, which is the theme of what we're talking about today. And of course, it's such an honor to be here with my distinguished cousin, and it's wonderful to see you today. I'm going to speak very briefly about the impact that specifically my grandfather, Aaron Soloveichik Zatzal, had on my life. And I'm going to give a brief preface in the spirit of the Yiddish phrase, Eider hebechon reden will ich sagen a paar Wörter. Before I speak, I'll say a few words. I'm going to give a very brief preface about one unique aspect of my grandfather's educational philosophy that may seem minor, but actually speaks volumes, and then I'll briefly outline a few ramifications of that uniqueness. The one small feature that I want to focus on is this, that my grandfather, unlike most Rosh Yeshiva, most Magidei Shir, when he was teaching a Masechta, he would not skip the Agadata. When he came to the actual stories in the Gemara, the Agadata, the stories of Chazal, he would teach that as part of his shir, just as much as when he was teaching the Lamdish Sugyas. So, for example, Gemara Chulin was mentioned. Chulin opens up. If you're teaching the first parak of Chulin, it's filled with technical sugyas, very complicated, very rich, very lamdish. Rov Metzuyin Etzel Shchita Mumchin. You're discussing sugyas like Chazaka and Rov and Ne'amonos and the status of Machal Shabbos B'var Hesia, Kusi, Ovid Avodah Zarah. So many different rich halachic topics. And then just a few blot in, Daf Hey, Daf Vav, you get to a story. And the story is about Rav Pinchas ben Yoyer. Rav Pinchas ben Yoyer was traveling, and he was traveling with another Jew who was holding wheat for matzahs, and he was traveling also with a non-Jew who just happened to be traveling with them, but had nothing to do with them whatsoever. They come to a river Ginoi, I think, and Rav Pinchas ben Yoyer has an argument with the river and ultimately commands the river to split for him because he's Pinchas ben Yoyer, and the river splits for Pinchas ben Yoyer, and then he crosses. And then the river comes back together, and now this Jew who's carrying wheat for matzahs comes over to the river, and Rav Pinchas ben Yoyer says to the river, this Jew is on his way to do a mitzvah, you have to split for him as well. And so the river splits for him, and then he crosses. And then closes up again, and then this non-Jew who really has nothing to do with them comes to the river, and Pinchas ben Yoyer says to the river, you have to split for him as well, because you don't want anybody to say, Kach osin livnei levaya. Is this how you treat a fellow traveler? That's the story. And my grandfather would teach that in shir, and he would instruct his students that this story, as much as the sukkahs you were learning before, if not even more, actually have to illustrate to us how we should live our lives. So, to give an actual instantiation, in the late 1960s, my grandfather was invited to a shul in Chicago on one Shabbos to an ufruf of the son of the rabbi of that shul. My grandfather was coming there to speak, and of course his job there was to speak about the son of the rabbi of the shul, whose ufruf it was that day. My grandfather gets there, he has a speech prepared, and then he sees that aside from the son of the rav of the shul, there was another young man there whose ufruf it also was that day. And so my grandfather says to my father was then a teenager, my father was his Talmud, he was a student, and my grandfather says to my father, he says, I have to figure out how to work this other person, this other chassan, into my speech. So my father says to him, Abba, he says, you don't have to do that. No one expects you to do that. Everybody knows that you're here because you're a friend of the Rav of the shul. And you're here to speak about the son of the Rav of the shul. You don't have to fit in this other chassan. You don't know this other chassan from a hole in the wall. And my grandfather says to my father, without thinking, he says, we don't want people to say, "Kach ochsen lebnei levoya." Is this how you treat a fellow traveler? And so I actually thought, if I ever wrote a biographical essay of my father, I would call it Agadic Man. Not because my grandfather didn't care about halacha, he cared very deeply about halacha. But my grandfather believed very strongly that halacha provides us with the rules about how we are supposed to live our life, but the Agadata provides us with portraits and character about how the halacha's values are instantiated in our lives, how we are supposed to be the people that the Torah expects us to be. That's who my grandfather was. Now let me give you very briefly a couple of ramifications of this perspective, the perspective, if you will, of Agadic man. The first is this. My grandfather was very concerned that a focus on the laws and the rituals of halacha, which are essential, which guide our lives, and learning these laws are a very communion with the mind of God. And yet, nevertheless, he was worried that only a focus on this can lead to an actual detraction in the ethical nature of our character. There's a joke which was actually told to me by Michael Wishigrad, who just passed away, the theologian Michael Wishigrad, who had such an impact on my life, and who grew up in Germany before the war. Michael told me a joke about the Jewish community in Frankfurt at the end of the 19th century. And so you have two Orthodox Jews who are in the Orthodox community of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, and it's Yom Kippur, and it's the break between Mincha and Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur. So they go outside for a little fresh air before going back in for Ne'ilah. And they see across the street, they see that the Reformed temple across the street is getting out, services are over, and that all the Jews from the Reformed temple are going out of the temple and they're going straight to the cafe, and they're smoking, and they're eating, and they're drinking. And the Orthodox Jews go over to these Reformed Jews and they say to them, "What are you doing? There's a couple hours left to Yom Kippur. You can't eat yet." And the Reformed Jews say, "Oh, you should have heard the sermon that our rabbi just gave in the temple. Our rabbi told us that Judaism is really all about ethics. And that's really all that's important. And you don't need all these antiquated doctrines and dogma and rituals. It's just important that you be ethical." And so one of the Orthodox Jews turns to one of the other Orthodox Jews and says, "These guys are idiots. For a couple hours of eating, they have to be ethical the whole rest of the year." You shouldn't laugh at that. You're anti-Semites for laughing at that, by the way. So, on the one hand, right, my grandfather, I mentioned this in the book, always quoted the Agadata about Shimon ben Shetach in the Yerushalmi and Bav Metzia, in which Shimon ben Shetach is bought by his students. They buy him a donkey from a Gentile donkey dealer. Turns out that the donkey dealer accidentally leaves a diamond or a precious stone attached to the collar, and his students say to Shimon ben Shetach, "This is great, now you can retire. You can retire with this jewel." And Shimon ben Shetach says, "No, you have to give it back to him. He didn't know that it was attached to there." And the students say, "Avaluli matanu Rabbeinu," but Rabbeinu, you taught us that the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda does not apply to Nachrim. And Shimon ben Shetach responds, "V'chiat savran de Shimon ben Shetach barbaranu." Do you think Shimon ben Shetach is a barbarian? And they give back the stone, and the donkey dealer says, blessed is the God of Shimon ben Shetach. And Shimon ben Shetach says, "I'd rather hear, blessed is the God of Shimon ben Shetach, than receive all the precious jewels in the world." And my grandfather used to tell that to his Talmidim all the time. Because for him, halacha has to form our character. And we have to learn from the Agadata how that character is actually formed. That's one side of the coin. That's the first ramification. The second ramification, of course, is the other side of the coin, which is that an ethics divorced from the eternal rules of halacha is an ethics divorced from Judaism itself. Michael Wishigrad himself once provocatively put it this way. He said, ethics is the Judaism of the assimilated. Ethics is the Judaism of the assimilated. Which means that when you divorce your ethics from the eternal rules of the halacha, then you get an ethics that is not Jewish ethics at all. And in the critique that my grandfather, throughout his life, gave to society when he thought they were not appreciative enough of the halacha's approach to the sanctity of human life, or the halakha's approach to Jewish sexual mores, was constantly concerned about this, that an ethics divorced from halakha is not Jewish ethics. And it becomes instead just an expression of whatever the progressive values of society at the time. It becomes not Yahadus, but rather a very different word, which is way overused, and that's Tikkun Olam. Tikkun Olam all too often refers to an ethics divorced from Judaism. Like the joke about the Americans who are visiting Israel and ask their Israeli tour guide, how do you say Tikkun Olam in Hebrew? That too was a constant concern of his. So he was worried about both sides of the coin. And he was worried about teaching his students how to live the completely Jewish life, to instantiate both the rules of the halacha and the values and the character of the Agadata. And the third and final ramification of this was that my grandfather felt that it's not just important to live according to the halakha's eternal rules. And it's not just important to live and embody an ethical character. It's also important to take the halakha and its values and seek to impact the world. My grandfather's most popular shiurim in the 1960s were the Chumash shiurim, which he would give in First Hall. I think they're all now on YU Torah, actually. And you can go on YU Torah and hear my grandfather at his strength before the stroke. And people would ditch shiur. They would ditch, I think, even the rough shiur. They would come. Because he was the one person, the one Rosh Yeshiva was talking about the issues of his day and what the Torah would say about that. David Lukens tells a story that he once went to visit Rav Gifter, who went to YU and then went to Telz. And Rav Gifter asked him, what's Rav Aaron speaking about? This is in the 60s. And he said, Rav Aaron Soloveichik is very concerned about Biafra, some third world country where people were being massacred. And Rav Gifter said, it's not just that Rav Aaron Soloveichik is the only gadol who cares about Biafra. He's the only gadol who's ever heard of Biafra. My grandfather ultimately felt that we are obligated to care about the world, not just physical suffering around the world, which we must be concerned about, but also that if we feel that society, even societies that don't care about us, but especially American society, which does care about us and has been so good to us, we have to care when they are missing the moral and spiritual mark, then it's our obligation to actually seek, to instruct, and to better society. Because kach osin libnei lavoya. Ultimately, they are our Americans and the world. They are our fellow human beings. They are our fellow travelers. And therefore, this is our job. That's a lesson my grandfather taught me, not just in what he taught in shiur, but also in the way he lived. And that's why his memory lives in my heart every day of my life. Thank you.
I have a lot of questions for our panelists, probably enough to, only the questions that I can't sleep tonight without hearing the answers to them would keep us here till at least 4 o'clock. But I'll start with one. We've heard a lot from, specifically just now, from Rabbi Dr. Soloveichik about Torah and the outside world, how we have to make an impact, how Torah has to speak to the outside world, we have to be involved. We heard from President Joel about Torah Ma'ada L'Chatchila, and I think we're all here today because we believe in Torah Ma'ada L'Chatchila. We believe in being part of the world. We don't believe that the right way to educate our children is to make a ghetto and build a big wall around it and make sure that they never find out that there's anything outside that wall. But that brings with it a challenge. All too often, in our generation, kids could grow up and become so enamored and so influenced by that outside world that they abandon our lifestyle, they abandon our values. Not only that, but I think perhaps our generation, or the generation we're educating now, faces challenges that maybe we didn't challenge, our parents and teachers didn't face when they were educating us. I think when I grew up, when my parents' generation grew up, the Torah lifestyle, our Masorah made a lot of demands on us. but the values, the family values of the Torah, dovetailed and matched fairly well the values of the respectable, not the hippies, but the respectable outside society. I think now we're bringing up kids in a world where the values of the Torah are considered not just outdated and antiquated, but unethical by outside society. Our kids are going out there to college, out there to the world, to wherever it is, and are not only facing the challenges of how to balance modern and Orthodox Torah and Mada, loyalty to their Masorah versus openness to the outside world, but how to face an onslaught of professors, colleagues, friends, media, social media, telling them that the Torah's views on homosexuality are unethical, and the Torah's views on transgender are unethical, and the Torah's views on gender roles are unethical, and many of our youth are having a lot of trouble facing that challenge. What can we do? What direction should we take as educators in educating the next generation to be able to meet, to face all those challenges, and to thrive and realize the ideals that we're trying to teach them? Perhaps Esti could speak first about this.
You were discussing things that you don't fall asleep because of them. So I don't have a direct answer. I'm sure you didn't expect a direct answer. But I do want to say that I have a lot of thoughts about the general idea of what you call in Hebrew, I wouldn't translate modern Orthodox to the Tilumi, which is the direct translation, but I think the question you're talking about of modern Orthodoxy, in Hebrew I would call it Kodesh V'chol. How do we combine in our life Kodesh V'chol? And I'll start from the end. Sometimes as a person, religious Ovedet Hashem, as a mother, as an educator, I think to myself, I'll say it as directly as I can say, we are literally crazy. We are sending our kids and ourselves to challenges and to places that we and they don't have enough tools to cope with. And I feel that the great idea of a modern Orthodoxy, דתי לאומי, תלכו לקדש את החול, you can go every place, you have self-confidence, you're terrific, you can go to Harvard and to Yale ולצבא ולכל מקום, and wherever you're going to go, you're going to be terrific. And you can read any book you want to read, and we can have free internet, and we can talk to whoever we want, and we can have tons of different friends, because we are the best of the best, and we have the best modern Orthodoxy philosophy, lechatchila. I'll say it in Hebrew, because I don't say it in English, but I'll explain it. זה לא עומד במבחן המציאות. It's that, the bottom line, we don't succeed. Not good enough. Not as we should. That's the question. I can enlarge the question, but I think that's something that I discuss a lot, and it bothers me a lot, and I think it's challenging me a lot. Years ago, I used to think that the main thing that I can give my students is self-confidence in their religious life, in our way of Torah and Mada, and modern Orthodoxy, and being completely integrated in the world, and I gave them self-confidence. I used to say to them at the end of the year, you're the best, we have the best ideologically, you have such wonderful Torah base of orthodoxy, of limud Torah, of kiyum mitzvot, of mechoyavut hilchatit, go out there and capture the world. And what I have learned, that sometimes I think for some of our students, it's a too big challenge. I saw too many people that got to places that they didn't want to get there, and the challenge was too big, too hard. And I mentioned my mother before, so my mother always taught us that she was brought up in the Rav's house, and the biggest educational message was, we trust you. You can go wherever you want. Nothing was not allowed to be read or saw or taught or go to. You can go every place you want to go. You can do whatever you want. You have complete trust in Torah, in mitzvot, in avodat Hashem, and do whatever you want. And I think that's a wonderful religious message. One day we were sitting in the kitchen, and I don't know, Shabbat table maybe. My mother, I told her the story last night, she didn't remember it. But we were discussing internet rimon. What is internet rimon in English? The option of, a filter internet. And my mother said, what, you don't have internet rimon? There's no meaning in having internet rimon, because every capable child within 5 minutes can internet rimon. So I said, Mommy, you're saying that? I don't believe it. What about you don't have to censorize anything? You can do whatever you want. You can see whatever you want. What about the trust you were talking about? Why should I have internet rimon? And she thought for a second, and she said, but you know something? The world today, the internet today, the challenges today around us are much bigger than they were 60 years when I grew up in America. And I think that when we challenge our students and say, read whatever book you want, so they used to, I think when I say reading books and being engaged in the world, I maybe think about Shakespeare or Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. But when they go out and read anything that's written today, ב-2016, it's not really Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Shakespeare, which deals with really serious questions that can enrich my religious life. And today, when I look at the challenges that I send myself, my kids, and my students, what they're exposed to, I don't only discuss ביטחון עצמי, self-confidence. I also say, be careful. Make sure you're prepared. Understand what the challenges are. Understand where the dangers are. I think the desert is a beautiful place to go to, but you have to go prepared. And today I like to say, let's see what your decisions are. Let's see where you're going to. Let's see what are going to be our challenges. And I'm not always sure. Sometimes I say, maybe going to that university is not a good idea. And maybe learning that subject, even though we want to be engaged in the world and we can do everything, and we have self-confidence and we can do, and the Torah is me'al hakol. Sometimes I feel that the challenges today, we don't give our students enough tools of depth, b'kiyum mitzvot, b'torah. Maybe the balance between modern orthodoxy is not. I think in order to go to every place in the world, the center of Torah as the main part of aspect through what we look, and we view the world, sometimes they were already, I think my generation maybe, had the zchut of being so enthusiastic about Torah and Mada, lekadesh et hachol in the language of Rav Kook. And our students, our children were born right into it. And I don't think that always they have the ability, or we don't transmit to them totally, maybe because the things I said before, the understanding that Kodem Kol is the Torah. Torah is the way I view the world. And depthing the Jewish education, the religious experience, the combination of what Torah means. Sometimes I think, my brother quoted to me someone who said, the Orthodox are already not modern, and the modern are not Orthodox. And I think that we have to be challenged and make a cheshbon nefesh about the balance between modern and Orthodox, and do we give our kids enough tools? I would say, לא רק להבחין בין קודש לחול, Rav Kook talks about לקדש את החול. And I completely believe in לקדש את החול. But I think we have to teach our students more להבדיל בין קודש לחול. And even more than that, להבדיל בין חול לחול. כי יש חול שיכול להיות קדוש, יש חול that's okay, and יש חול, someone said to me yesterday, שהוא בוץ. יש חול that it's a no. And today I find myself asking my questions. Does my 12-year-old daughter have enough tools to see as a whole, as a potential לקדש אותו? As a whole, it's okay if it's involved in her life, and as a whole, she should shut off the internet before she sees it. Not that I want, last sentence, not that I want to regret from Torah and Mada and modern Orthodoxy, but I think we should, it's a big challenge, and we should learn also to say the words, you're terrific, but be careful.
Maybe Rabbi Soloveichik, could you comment on this briefly?
Sure, comment on that briefly. I think there is a lot to what was just said. And the question, I think, really is the most critical question that faces us today. The truth is, as Rabbi Bednarsh kindly mentioned, we have this book that just put out portraits of of great Torah figures who bridged Torah in the world. I hope you'll take a look at the book. I want to thank Dr. Stuart Halpern, who's here, without whom the book would never have really come to be. But the challenges that they face in the past century are fundamentally different. So if what the Rav sought to do was to defend Torah through the medium of philosophy, today's threats do not come from philosophy. And they don't come from the fact that 1,000 students sit in a biblical criticism class by Jim Kugel in Harvard either. That's not the great threat at Harvard. The two greatest threats in the academy today, I think, are first and foremost a culture of hedonism, which is rampant among the students. Hedonism of many kinds, but first and foremost sexual hedonism. And the second is that if there is one worldview that is dominant in the modern world, Rabbi Sachs has said a lot about this, it's this, that you can be whatever you want to be. And the past doesn't bind you, and the past should not obligate you. If you look at the worst violations of this, if you actually watch, there's a whole genre of this, speeches by guests at graduations. If you watch graduation speeches all over, at great schools all over America, whoever, they'll have some celebrity come speak, and they'll tell the students, blaze your own path, do whatever you want to do. Even as you have no obligation to the past. Even as sitting in the audience are parents who have just shelled out hundreds of thousands of dollars for their students to go to that school, the message is, they don't obligate you. Whereas, of course, Judaism believes in individuality, but at the heart of Jewish thought begins with the notion that from the moment you're born as a Jew, you have a whole host of obligations, and all of the generations, past, present, and future, are relying on you, but no pressure. That's Judaism. And so the message out there, which is you can do whatever you want to do, and the notion that who you're related to obligates you or binds you to your other relatives around the world, that's bigoted. And those are the two great threats. And what I think what that means is, in part, that we have to, on the one hand, courageously fight that, and actually articulate an eloquent perspective that can help fight that, just as the giants of the past actually led Torah Judaism in fighting the challenges of the past. But we also have to know when to, at certain points, and especially with children of certain ages, cut ourselves off at a certain point. And that means there is what to be learned, in part, from the Haredi world as well. Our children are not allowed smartphones, and they're not allowed to go on the internet to do whatever they want. On the other hand, the notion that all internet is treif and you can't learn how to use the internet, using the internet in modern society is like driving. If you don't know how to do it, you can't function. I'm sure many of you saw when the Asifa was held, right? This was the Haredi gathering of 40,000 people to talk about how terrible the internet was. My favorite thing that I saw online about it actually was somebody put on the top 10 tweets at the Asifa. And one of them was lost my brother at the Asifa. Last seen wearing white shirt, black pants, and glasses. Okay, so on the one hand, yesh gvul, but on the other hand, yesh gvul. And so we have to know where to draw the line. And that means we have to really make hard choices about how exposed our children are to popular culture, both in the schools we choose for them and in the lives that we let them live. I'll end with this. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein once was asked about what he thought was the right derech, and obviously, he would say, and I would certainly agree, that every child is different and different people have to make different choices. And he himself said when answering that he's biased because this reflects his own experience, and it certainly reflects my own experience. But he felt that going to yeshiva and really being shakua in yeshiva, and first in learning and then in the yeshiva university, and then going to graduate school after he was married and had many years, was the derech that he thought was very important. Certainly, again, I'm biased because it's the derech that I chose, that my wife chose, the derech that we would choose for our children. Every person makes different choices for different children, but each parent is obligated to think hard about whether we have to draw the line in a different place than we would draw it 40 years ago.
President Joel.
I always admire a bumper sticker I saw that said, "Always remember you're unique, just like everyone else." Okay? So the notion that somehow we're in a whole different time is true, but we were always in a whole different time. I think we are bombarded much more, primarily through social media and through the advent of a modern civilization that makes everything closer, even as it makes us feel more powerless. But just two very brief answers. One is, as Rav Meir said, I think if you really want to engage in the world, that's why God invented graduate school. And I think it's critically important that our children attend Yeshiva University, unless they're living in Israel. I think it is true that we want our children to engage in the world, and I don't think we give up on the notion not of Kodesh and Chol, but on being Mekadesh the Chol, seeing how we can make for our children and those around us that. But you know what? We don't do well by ourselves. So the duality of making sure we are in a community of like-mindedness that together believe that we're not alone and we should be elsewhere, and you can't dance around the Shabbos table by yourself. You need community, but by the same token, you need to put yourselves in environments where you struggle with that synthesis all the time, and we need each other to be able to do that. It's always been a challenge to find a derech hamamutza. It's always been a challenge to live with nuance, probably for Rambam as well. And yes, the transactions are harder today, but I don't think the answer is to withdraw. The answer is to educate our children to know their place, to have their home, and to venture forth carefully.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I think New York is a terrific place. But we see what's going on in Europe. We see the direction of America. And there's been nothing said at all about how a modern Jew, wherever he lives, has to view the trajectory of modern society and where that puts us as a religious personality.
Okay. Perhaps we could broaden that question a little and ask about modern Orthodox education specifically in America. The modern Orthodox community in America is the religious Zionist community in America, and we believe that very strongly. Should we be educating, or we certainly should be educating about the centrality of Medinat Yisrael, the centrality of Israel, and not just armchair Zionism, but Tachlis Zionism, about Aliyah, which YU has been doing very successfly in the past decade. But what message should we be sending modern Orthodox students, modern Orthodox kids that we are educating in America? Do you have to make Aliyah in order to be a good Jew? Is there an option to lead a full Jewish life in America? Should we be investing in the future of the American Jewish community, or should we be investing as many of our youth as we can in this great, amazing miracle called Medinat Yisrael? Perhaps President Joel could comment briefly about that.
Yes. yes. The answer is yes. Come on. Look, there is no question. I was in Paris a few weeks ago for a unity concert between Medinat Yisrael, America, and France, and there were 2,500 Parisians in the Rue de la Victoire synagogue, not arguing for 3 hours. It was a great aspect of unity. And there is no question that you, sir, raise existential questions about the tenor of the world and the place of the Jew in the world, just from a safety and security point of view. And I think we need to be vigilant about that. I think we need not decide that that is the challenge of our age. I think the challenge of our age lies within ourselves and who we are. Because often the answer to anti-Semitism is for people to assimilate, and we've learned how virulent that is. As far as Aliyah is concerned, cynics in the audience could say, I'm glad he said 15% of your students make Aliyah. That means 85% don't. And not taking issue with your obvious OLED definition of armchair Zionism, I would tell you that I think the centrality of RIETS Israel and Medinat Yisrael to Jewish life and to Jewish experience and to Torah is clearly there and important. There are probably those of us who believe that making something the center of your world doesn't mean that you're always sitting there. And I think the challenge for a lot of people, and I know it was for me, I gave a talk at a seminar several years ago where I was talking about Israel and here in Jerusalem, and someone stood up, maybe someone in this audience, and said to me, President Joel, do you consider yourself a failure because you haven't made Aliyah? And if not, why not? So I was warned not to take questions, but I said, no problem. So I thought about it, and I said, no, truthfully, I don't consider myself a failure, but I do consider myself incomplete. Okay? There is no question but that the fullest possible Torah life and life of a Jew can but be lived in Artseinu HaKadosha. On the other hand, a lot of our life and our ideals is to try to achieve shleimut, to try to achieve as much of the total package as we can. For some, that pursuit of being all you can be and being able to be Mekadei Shem Shemayim comes from being a Jew in other places as well. And particularly in modernity, when you're only one night's jet lag away. So I think we have to always paint for our children a notion of Israel as the homeland and the person where you can be complete. Sometimes by being here to be complete here, there's something else that's missing as a result of that, and we have to make decisions and struggle with it. And that's as ambivalent as I'll be.
Thank you. Please.
I'll be smart enough not to say anything about Aliyah. I already said enough about American education, but I do want to say one sentence. Let's compromise for America teaching their students Ivrit. That will be the beginning of a discussion of Aliyah. America challenges in French and Latin and German and IP science and IP bio in high school, but no one is challenged in Ivrit, and the level of Ivrit that American high schools and adults know is painful for me as an Israeli. And how can you daven? How can you daven if you don't know Ivrit? How can you learn? I just don't get it. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to add to that it would be very nice. It would be very nice if when a huge percentage of our children come here to learn in yeshivot and seminaries for a year, if the language of instruction would be Hebrew and not English, it would be a very fine thing.
And I have a lot of questions. I think I was told by whoever's in charge that this panel had to end by 11:30, but since it already didn't, let me throw out one more question to the panelists. The role of, or rather, the modality of educating women in the modern Orthodox world in the 21st century. Perhaps we're at a crossroads. Perhaps we've always been at a crossroads. Perspective is definitely useful. But on the one hand, we want to educate our girls. We want to educate the next generation to be empowered in learning, to be empowered in ruchniyot, in spirituality, to be empowered in leadership, to be able to realize their potential for their own sake and for the sake of the klal. On the other hand, we're stepping into a minefield of issues that you just have to open the paper, you just have to go to shul and hear what people are talking about at the Kiddush, of how to balance empowering women with teaching and appreciation for the fact that we stand for something different than the rest of liberal Western culture stands for, and that men and women have different roles, and men and women have different expectations of Avodat Hashem, especially in terms of family. This challenge is particularly difficult because the difference between the roles of men and women comes up most obviously after marriage, when we're building a family, but we're educating girls in high school and college when they are, as a single girl, they don't have any different family responsibilities than a single boy. So how do we, what should we be doing in order to strike this balance, in order to successfully educate women who will be empowered but traditional and live up to our ideals?
Yeah, since my institution's been in the news recently and in the midst of all sturm and drama, let me just say something about it. I think you made a statement that I think the challenge for men and women is to know how to confront modernity and the challenges with effective sexual roles. I do not talk about egalitarianism, but I do talk about equalitarianism. And I believe all of us have a struggle to say, how do we deal with a contemporary liberal ethos while being true to what we are? The challenge of being a man and being true to our ideals and not compromising. And it's no different than being a woman. I think it's a matter of choosing appropriate roles. I will tell you that you should probably, at least outside of Israel, right? Yeshiva University is the institution with the largest number of women learning Torah on the highest levels in the history of the universe. And that continues unabated. And it continues unabated, and you can talk to Karen Bacon about what she has created at Stern College, and the level of education, and the level of Torah learning, and the level of engagement with issues that women do. Our GPATS program produces, I think it's the only master's around solely for women in advanced Talmudic and biblical study. I think the number of women who are learning and achieving PhDs in our Revel Graduate School of Higher Jewish Learning and in the Azrieli School of Jewish Education is serious and important. I don't think we can allow the discussion to be hijacked by a series of conclusory statements of political correctness. And I think if you look at the achievements of women today, and as Torah educators, as community leaders, as community educators, I will tell you that Dean Bacon today is the first woman to be Dean of Yeshiva College. Although in an interesting twist on history, she's the second Bacon to be Dean of Yeshiva College, so go figure.
You think you can discuss such a subject in 2 minutes in the last question? No, I'm serious. Kilu, it's a subject that needs, it's like, oh, can you discuss your whole life in 5 minutes because I have to go home to put on a chont, you know, Kilu? And now my husband also has to go home to do something in the kitchen to a Shabbos too. Maybe that's the answer. But I think it's really, to be very honest, it's a serious subject. I agree that YU is doing, Stern College is doing way a lot, but still, Stern College is not as yeshiva-oriented as YU is, even though it's doing a lot. but still YU is a Y and a U, and the experience of the yeshiva that the boys get, the girls get in GPATs, but in the bachelor's degree, they get high-level Gemara. They really get high-level Gemara, but they don't get the experience of a whole yeshiva as the boys do. So there's a lot to do, even though you're doing a lot, we can do even more. But there's so many questions about tradition and roles, and I think everybody is trying to balance together, and it's not something that we can really discuss seriously. It's a big, gentle balance between running forward and stopping in the... One option is not to run, not to challenge at all, because you're going to challenge them in GPACs, and then they're not going to be rabbis, so maybe you won't challenge them. The option is to challenge them and trust them that they're going to stop exactly and be very happy with their role as Gemara teachers, even though you train them to be way more. So will they stop in exact? So the Haredi world doesn't even start. We start and believe that they're going to stop in the exact traditional view as we view it, exactly being challenged, knowing Gemara, but not trying to be something that you shouldn't be because you're a woman. People say to me, why do you want your students to wake up in time for davening? They're not going to wake up to davening when they're going to be mothers. The other people say, they're not counted to minions, so why should I wake up? And I think that I can demand them to be very seriously, religiously, daven in time, be an 8 o'clock exactly Shabbos minion, and be very happy with that they're not counted to the minion. So some do exactly, they have the exact same feelings that I do. They get up in time for minion. They're not very frustrated that they're not counted. They're very happy with their road. They run kadima. Some say, when you pushed me so hard, you didn't warn me how that I'm going to get a bump when I have to stop. And I want them to stop and be very happy. And some say to me, you pushed me, so I'm running way far away from you. What do you want? I jumped over the wall. And I still continue chatting them and pushing them. But if you want to make another morning discussing women's issues, I'll be happy to do that if it's not a Friday and not after 11:30.
Thank you very much. My time is up. I've been told that lo pa'am v'lo pa'amayim. There's a lot more questions that I have. I would like to ask about Neo-Hasidus, about how that plays into the future of modern Orthodoxy, which of the issues that we've just discussed that are very difficult that might have an answer to, or that might lead us towards an answer. There's a lot of questions I have, but I am, for one, it makes me feel very confident that we have people like our panelists who are working on answering these questions, and even more importantly, working on educating the next generation of people who will come up with the answers that perhaps we will never come up with ourselves to solve the challenges of modern Orthodoxy, Torah Mad in the next generation. Thank you so much, Rabbi Soloveichik, Esti Rosenberg, President Richard Joel, and thank you everyone for coming and participating, and wishing you all Shabbat Shalom.